On today's episode of Copper Cutlass Garage. Actually, I wish that was my intro. That'd be pretty fucking funny. But either way, guys, as you can see, I actually cleaned off the cross member for the Pontiac. It's amazing. That's actually like bare steel from 1971. This came off of a 71 Cutlass. Kind of figuring out how I want to lay stuff out here to be as... I guess as square as possible. I think I had like which I bought some 3/4 square tubing, but I used like the 3/4 inch shock spacers for the studs. But that leaves me no wiggle room. That was my spacer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld them approximately like 3/8 of an inch onto this ledge of the angle iron, so that way we got some adjustment up and down, and we're not completely topped out, so we can get the right pitch on the transmission once we get our driveline angles all figured out. So, but again, that's going to be not until we get a drive shaft. But for now, I have to plan ahead and give myself enough adjustability to where we can do that. So essentially, I'm just going to weld some angle iron on each end. And when the time comes and it's in place, we already have pre-existing holes where we had it bolted up. I'm probably going to move it in between those to use the angle iron. So probably what I'll end up doing is, once everything's in place, make a hole here and here, and do something like that, or something that'll work out once I'm down there. For now, I won't really know. It is going to change a little bit where it's sat widthwise, but not a whole lot. So I think this will work out pretty good. I'm going to do some cutting, and then I'll weld it up, and then I got all of it cleaned up. So what you're seeing there is like bare metal. It's pretty clean. I'm going to wipe it down with some wax and grease remover, and then I'm going to coat it with the platinum Eastwood stuff you saw us using on the frame, and then I'll just bomb it with some black spray paint. I got plenty of that, and it'll match the rest of the frame, and it'll look real nice and neat in there. And then hopefully this is pretty much our prep work to get the engine in this weekend. I still have to bolt the engine to the transmission. But without further ado, I won't waste your time with all that shit. I'm going to get this already welded up, and then I'll show you guys what it looked like after. Alright, so I got the cross member welded up. As you can see, I welded angle iron across. I got like 2 nice joints on each side, even on the other side. Same as on that side, you can see the trail. Oh, look how clean that is. Did as much welding as I could underneath, even though it was a thin margin to work with. But came out pretty good. Not bad. Obviously, we got some flash rust. This piece is still fucking hot. But Jesus fuck, did I fill that thing. Let me go grab some fucking... Oh, maybe this will work. A fucking screwdriver. Let me pick this thing up. You know that thing where it's like, you should know better? Alright. So as you can see, I welded the shit out of this thing. These are my 2 pieces of angle iron that pretty much made like 2 split brackets to hold the core support in. Well, I welded the top, that, it had an offset. I even plug welded those 3/8 holes where the bolts went. And I did 2 beads underneath. So that's like more than enough. And now I did mention that I was going to space this, but I used some, I know I talked about using that. If I used that, I would have been in better shape. But this, well, this here is easier to cut than that. And this is leftover scrap from when I was teaching my wife to weld. I was cleaning out my garage last weekend, and I threw out a bunch of scrap. And I was tossing scrap into our container at work. And I was about to throw this fucking thing. I'm like, holy shit, I still got like 2 feet of perfectly good usable angle iron here. Aha! So the scrap saved us. So either way, I welded it flat to it. And if I have to run spacers, what I'm probably going to end up doing is I'm going to go buy machinist bushings. at the hardware store once I figure out what I need. And they sell them in like 1/8 inch increments. So if I need, because I added, so you figure that angle iron's about 120 to 125 thousandths, which is about 1/8 of an inch. So you figure 1/8 of an inch plus 1/2 an inch is 0.625. We're at about like, we would need 5/8 for it to be 3/4 of an inch. But I highly doubt that. Again, when I measured the driveline height, I did it on the lift at work and I referenced the chassis, but this chassis flexed so much that I thought about it as I was getting stuff ready that I'm like, you know what? I'm going to weld it flat. If I have to adjust it, I'll probably just go get machining bushings, take these brackets off, which with the car in place, if I put it up on the lift at work and put the trans jack on it, I could still slip those brackets out of each side of the frame without having to remove the cross member. So that's kind of the beauty of this. And that's also the nice thing about having these angle iron pieces. You don't have to helicopter the cross member to slip it out. It literally, you just get your 4 bolts out and it'll slide straight out because it's not sitting inside of the frame like most typical cross members are on GM A bodies or B bodies. This is actually sitting on these ledges that I made. So on this side, on the passenger side, it's already bolted in. And on this side, it's going to obviously be bolted in, but that's what's going to hold our. And again, I'd mentioned that the inside of this frame is a little asymmetrical, so the notches, the openings don't exactly jive from side to side. I was able to use just one piece of angle iron on the one side because the ledge that rides like towards the front is wider on this side of the car. On that side, it's not as wide, so that's why I had to use 2 pieces butted up to each other to extend that. Again, I, like an idiot, measured and cut. Well, actually, no, I lie. I wasn't an idiot because these cross members taper, and that taper was useless for me, so I cut this back to the straightest point I could, and that's what I had to work with when I originally made this cross member. And I cut this up and fabbed it up in my garage. I didn't do this at work. I dialed it in at work after I'd got it in because I had to swap out the the transmission when I went to the EFI, which I sold the EFI. So, but either way, this still serves its purpose. But for now, the objective is going to be to get the engine and the trans in, and then once we get everything in, measure our driveline angle, see where we're at, where the transmission's going to sit. I have to research that and find out what our ideal pitch is going to be, and then what I'll end up doing is I'll jack the transmission up, and I'll measure the difference between the bottom of that angle iron and that piece, and then that's the bushing that we're going to need. Or I could actually also make them because I still got this 1/2 inch 125 wall. This is actually a true 1/8 inch wall. That angle iron I think is 120, but this is actually 1/8 inch wall. I can cut this and make my own bushings, and then I can remove them and actually weld them to the angle iron, and then easy peasy. Or I can buy some flat bar, the same thickness I need. I mean, I can go whichever way I want with this. This is easy. Obviously, this is an A body cross member. Most B bodies have that, and that's the other thing too for guys who are kind of in the know on these cars. On the GM A bodies, and I think, or on the B bodies and on the G bodies, I want to say, they have that Nike swoosh cross member that goes from the driver's side to the passenger side, and it's impossible to run a dual exhaust system. You either have to notch it, and it's still not right. The nice thing about these is, so with this particular car, I'm running GM A body headers for an Oldsmobile, and they fit really good. I had to smash the firewall a little bit there, which is nice and painted now. And then I had to, kiss the tubes a little bit to get them in there. But the nice thing is that the spacing for these headers is referenced off the trans mount. So I don't have to guess where to notch the cross member. This is from an A body. And, I believe it's the same cross member for the Chevelles and everything. So if you were even to use this on a Caprice, your spacing for the headers is set up to go between those two spots. So if you have a hard time finding B body headers and you're going to put, say, a 350 small block in there, your headers are going to line up with those two humps. No questions asked. As long as the transmission is bolted correctly and it's lined up in there pretty good and you use the correct mounting positions for the engine. And that's another reason why I went with this. There was no guesswork to it. It was pretty much just cut, slip it in, and make it work. It was fairly easy. So at this point, I'm going to let you guys go. It's Thursday. This is just a little bit of setup work. Now that I got that done, Friday, I'm probably going to make these two things together. And Saturday, the wife is probably going to have to help me, because usually I would have my dad help me install an engine. Me and my dad have our routine down. My dad and I have worked on stuff over the years. Mainly I helped him a lot, and now that he's older, he gets to help me. So, he knows where I need him to go, and I know where he's going to go based off of history. And so now the wife gets to help me with that. So I'm going to let you guys go.